Blood and Briar, Chapter 11, Kin. Derek stared at the keys for a moment, leaving them hang on George's fingertips. Until I sign for the papers, I'll let you do the honors. Fine. I'll do the honors. George opened the door. The short porch was a 5 square foot shelf of flooring surrounded by screen windows and old boards. The planking making up the floor was pitted and buckled from decades of muddy boots and wet shoes, where a snow shovel leaned on the side of the house and a plastic 5-gallon bucket for sidewalk salt was set in the corner. The boards in the walls lost their natural wood density, with no more strength than heavy cardboard, the last remnants of paint fallen to the floor in tiny flakes. The screen was no more than a fine mesh of atmosphere. At the foot of the entry into the house was the outline of a welcome mat. As with the old equipment, the barn, the silos, and what all else the old man left behind, the welcome mat was no more. The kitchen was empty of everything that wasn't screwed or nailed down. The spot on the floor where the refrigerator and cook range had been still had the stains and dirt outlining their footprint. A broom and dustpan leaned against the kitchen sink. No mind paid to them. The cupboards were bare. The closet and pantry were left open, with scatters of dirt and scraps. A bag of pinto beans spilled on the floor, abandoned only because mice had gotten into them. The rest of the house is the same. George dropped the keys on the counter next to the sink. The two sons who lived in town took the whole deal to heart when they found out a stranger was getting the property. Well, getting everything. So they stripped everything out. I think the only things they left were the water heater and furnace. George moved the broom and pan where the refrigerator had been. Probably because they were too damned old. The furnace and water heater, that is. So was the fridge and range. I guess they took the fridge and range for spite. George watched Derek for a reaction. The young man circling around the kitchen, examining a corner, opening an empty cupboard, peering down the doorway into the basement. George continued. The rest of the place is much the same. No vehicles or implements or garden tools or anything like that. The old man had a pretty fancy car collection. Some of the old beaters brought a bit of money, like 20 tractors and some motorbikes and old equipment. Sure brought some money. The whole place was swarming with people. Not really my thing, though. People milling around the place like scavengers, picking the corpse clean. George ruminated over the argument between his wife and himself over the lawnmower he himself bought at the farm sale. Twice the price he convinced her he would have to pay. And it would take another small chunk of savings to get it working right. But dear, it's worth a bunch. And we need a new mower. There was his wife, her nose in the air. What part of new don't you understand? Derek looked along the ceiling for water spots. What's not your thing? Theft? Theft? I tell you I'm no thief. It's not my deal, what they all did between when the lawyer left and you showing up. George waved his hand at a fly that found his breath. Not sure that's what it was. Maybe. And maybe they were getting what they thought they were owed. What were they owed? Was there a clearly defined debt that hadn't been paid back to them? Was there a verbal promise or a contract? You know there wasn't. George looked for any reaction in the young man, some outrage or emotion, his own temper slowly boiling. The young man had the unemotional tone of reading from a script. They seemed to enjoy stripping the place. I'm certain everything will be taken care of. You seem confident, considering the property tax bill and all the other expenses racked up here. There's plenty. Plenty of what? Enough to take care of what is needed. George nodded. That's what I've heard. Derek took the broom and weighed it. What did you hear? George wondered if Derek was going to beat him. Isn't that what the young do to the old? Derek looked like the sort of creature who brutalized people for pennies. A likely reason for the scars on his head. Just another common thug. Your foster parents were loaded and left you a tidy sum, and now you're going to do what everyone in your shoes does. Derek started sweeping the dirt out from along the wall. He spotted a spider scurrying off and let it be. And what is that? Someone gets a load of cash from a dead relative and it's like winning the lottery. George watched Derek make small piles of dirt from the bottom of the basement door, from where the appliances were. Big fat money. Cheap punks who had nothing and now they think they own the world will throw that money around till there's nothing left. Sounds like you know from experience. George's mouth hung open. What? Cheap punk who had nothing and now thinks he owns the world. You're kind of shabby to be driving such a fine truck like you do. Top of the line, is it? You just go and fuck yourself. I owe nothing to nobody. Worked for everything I have. I owe nobody. But you do, cheap punk. Is that a fact? Derek leaned on the broom. It is when my name is on that list of people that old fool, and you, owe money to. I figure I should be paid for work, right? Were you hired? What? Derek cleared his throat. The dust tasted like an old farmhouse. Did someone from the estate hire you to do the work? No, but someone had to do it. So you volunteered, Derek smiled. How good of you. To hell with that. I did what had to be done. This whole place was a disaster because that old man let the place go to hell. You should see the pictures. There are tons of pictures of what this place looked like. All the big equipment pulled out of the weeds, the rodents and animals and the thistles. The whole place was a ruin. And after the auction company did their business, the place was a torn-up disaster. Who hired the auction company? The estate lawyer? I took charge and did what had to be done. You hired the auction company? You're in charge of the theft? Wait. No, I didn't do that. George stopped and took a long breath. He felt the blood pumping, and his hands shook. You volunteered. George stepped up close and jabbed a finger into Derek's shoulder. I did what needed to be done. You weren't here. That shit lawyer wasn't here. No one was here, so I did it, and I will be paid for my work. Derek looked down at the finger in his shoulder. A sharp chill ran down George's spine, and he snapped his finger back. You understand? The unwavering stance the young man had became frightening. The young man didn't twitch or flinch, and George felt as if he jammed his finger against the wall rather than against a man's gangly arm. That's what the letter from the estate lawyer said. Seems fair enough. Derek turned back to the dirt piles and pushed them to the center of the room. There were 4 dents in the linoleum from the table legs. Then what the hell is this volunteering bull? Perhaps you shouldn't be so defensive. I'm not defensive. Derek set the broom back. It's fascinating when you record someone and then play that back to them. They never sound like what they think they sound like. George clamped his teeth tight. He stepped back. You're recording this? No. Bullshit. Well, it is my place. I can do as I like, right? But I don't need a recording to tell you how you were being defensive.